I decided to use a Starbucks gift card that I got for Christmas this one morning before class. I live in a college town, and I wanted to go to the Starbucks closest to campus so I wouldn't be late to class. This one that we have doesn't have a drive-through window, so I had to walk in. When I walked up to the front door, there was a man and a woman that were sitting at the outdoor table, and they both made eye contact with me. I remember just thinking that it was kind of odd because they both looked me up and down. Plus, it's like 30 degrees and there were clearly some open chairs inside. Come to think of it, they didn't even have drinks or anything. I walked inside and ordered my drink like normal, but I could still feel them staring at me through the front window. Once I got my drink, I started to walk out to my car, passing the two people. I heard both of them stand up and start walking behind me without saying a single word. I then sped up, got into my car as fast as I could, and then locked all of the doors. Not even 2 seconds later, the woman then knocked aggressively on my driver's side window, essentially making me damn near piss myself. The man was right next to her with just a straight face, hands in his pockets, looking through the windows of my car as if he was searching for something that he wanted. I cracked the window like a centimeter so she couldn't fit her hand in or anything, and asked her if she needed anything, and then she told me to roll down the window some more. I just told her that it was really cold, so I'm going to keep it up. She then asked me if I could give them some money, and she seemed like she was insisting, not so much asking. I kind of just stumbled over with my words, and I told her that I paid with a gift card, and that I'm a pretty poor college student who didn't really have much cash. Which was true, but still, it sounded like an excuse. The man started to look confused and angry at me, and he yelled at me to get out of the car. That's when I noped the heck out of there and drove away as fast as I could. I'm really glad I got out of there, but they really scared the crap out of me. To be honest, I probably shouldn't have even talked to them at all, but lesson learned. So, a couple of years ago, I worked at a Starbucks. I have a lot of creepy stories from this Starbucks. Anyways, it was in a really interesting location. If you take a left out of the parking lot, you're in a high crime area. If you take a right, you're in an affluent area. Anyways, the incident occurred during a morning shift. I was working the window when this guy pulled up in his car. I tell him his total, handle his payment, and then turn to hand him his drink. As I'm leaning out of the window, he just smiles and then says to me,
"You're cute enough to take."
I'm now thinking, weird compliment, but whatever, when the smile slides right off of his face. It was just really creepy. So he drops the smile, and instead of taking the drink like a normal human being and leaving, he then grabs my arm and pulls as hard as he can. This man is legit trying to pull me out of the drive-thru window and into his car. Immediately, I use my other arm to grab onto the side of the window and I start pushing myself away from him. The coworker that was standing next to me starts screaming and grabs me by the waist and pulls as hard as she can. Very fortunately, my arm pops out of his grasp and my coworker and I hit the ground. The creepy man speeds off. I don't know what his exact plans were, but whatever they were, I'm really glad they didn't work out. This doesn't sound so bad compared to some of the other stories on here, but it really shook me up and something about it just had all of the alarm bells going off in my head. This happened literally 5 minutes ago. My friend and I were sitting on a bench in the middle of town waiting for our rides. Her ride arrives and then she leaves, so now I'm all alone. I'd also like to add that I'm also a girl. The entire time we were talking, there was this guy standing on the corner near our bench. He looked like he was in his mid-50s and he had a beer belly. After a few seconds after my friend leaves, the guy turns to me and starts walking over to the bench, all the while saying,
"Hey, how are you?"
I immediately think nope and get up and walk away speedily. As soon as I do this, however, He says in an extremely defensive tone,
My God, all I said was hello.
There's a Starbucks nearby, so I decide to walk into the store. I then sit down and look out the window and immediately notice that he is walking into the store as well. And very fast, mind you. So I get up and tell the barista that this man is following me and I don't know what to do. As soon as I say those words, the only other person in the Starbucks besides the barista, a woman also in her 50s, whips around and very aggressively tells me that the man is her husband, and she really doubts he's following me. I then go on to explain that I've had some really bad experiences before, and he approached me in an unsettling way. But before I can even finish the sentence, she then repeats in the same tone quite loudly that she really doesn't believe that her husband was following me. At this point, the husband enters the store and then starts saying,
All I said was hello. Good God.
And the woman is still yelling that it's her husband and she really doubts he was following me. At this point, I'm freaking out because I'm so overwhelmed by the two of them, especially the woman attacking me about the fact that he is her husband. So I just leave. I decide to run out of the Starbucks and down the street to another store until my ride arrives. I know it doesn't sound like much, but it was just very jarring. I'm very young and a female, and I was alone, and to have the two of them yelling at me about how he's her husband and what's wrong with saying hello was just way too much for me. I have really bad anxiety, and to be honest, you just really never know the intentions of a stranger. Saying hello in that tone of a voice to a young girl on the street in the middle of the night if you're a 50-year-old male is very unsettling. I know this isn't your typical creepy story, but it was very unsettling for me. This particular incident took place over the spring of 2011 when I was about 15 or 16 years old. My friends and I frequented the local Starbucks and we had a really great time there. Most of the employees were really great. One of them, named David, was kind of odd. I didn't think too much of him, and I always gave him the benefit of the doubt, even when my other friends called him creepy. My friends and I went there pretty quite often, and like usual people, we had to go to the bathroom every once in a while. One day we were there for a really long time, probably like 4 hours, and we noticed David going into the bathroom quite often. We didn't really think about it until about a month later when we saw an article online. Well, apparently David had put a camera into the bathroom and had been taking footage of young women and then putting it onto his computer. He would go into the bathroom about every hour and collect and download all of the footage. The police aren't really sure if he uploaded them onto the internet or even shared them at all. Unluckily for him, I'm severely lactose intolerant, and many of those milk-filled lattes probably didn't make the most attractive photos, if you catch my drift. Anyways though, he was arrested and I haven't heard about him since. Just a little background. On the day this happened, I was with my girlfriend. I'm also female. We're both just under about 5 feet tall and maybe 100 pounds soaking wet. My point is, we're pretty tiny. But anyways, on to the story. On this particular day, it had been raining outside and it seemed like the perfect weather to stay curled up inside and watching some movies. One problem, however: no snacks. So my girlfriend and I decided to walk to the mini-mart just down the street. As we're walking, we notice there is a man trailing some distance right behind us, and he's muttering to himself, talking under his breath. At first, we really paid no mind. There's a fairly large number of homeless people in our area, and sadly, many have mental illnesses. We continued walking and noticed he was still behind us. Weird. We get inside the store and start picking out snacks, and I noticed he is standing right outside the store, peering in, staring directly at us. At this point, I'm a little worried now, but when we check out, he is no longer there, so I brush it off. Further down the street from the store, there happens to be a Starbucks, so we decide to stop and get some coffee before walking back to her house. The entire walk, I felt like we were being watched, and I just couldn't shake the feeling of the uneasiness. We walk into the Starbucks and order our drinks and sit down to wait. I look out the window, and there's that same guy again. He's across the street, but he's still staring straight at us. At this point, I'm totally freaking out now and trying to tell my girl that this creep has been following us the whole time, but she insists that it's nothing. The next time I look up, the guy is inside the Starbucks and is staring at us with a look that I can only describe as totally predatory and hungry. I'm absolutely terrified at this point. We grab our drinks, are getting ready to head out, when he then yells out,
Hey, there you are.
Heads turn to see what the commotion is about me, and he calmly says,
That's my niece and daughter. I told them not to go anywhere without telling me.
My girlfriend finally reacts at this point, and then grabs my hand, and we nope the heck out of there. We speed walk down the street, hoping to put some distance between us before he can react. I turn back around, and lo and behold, he's still following us. He's not chasing after us, he's kind of just sauntering in a way, and has a really menacing look on his face. This guy was pretty well built and was close to 6 foot if I had to guess. If it came down to it, there was absolutely no way we could take him. We do the only logical thing that we can think of, and we start running. This is when he starts chasing us and then screaming out,
Don't go! Don't you want to play with me?
The road back to my girlfriend's house is pretty desolate with no houses for a few more blocks, and we're running away from the only area there would be people. At this point he's gaining on us, and I think at any minute he will catch up to us and that would be the end of us. The guy is maybe about 10 feet behind us when almost miraculously we see a car coming straight down the street. We start running towards it, waving our hands and yelling, trying to get this car to stop. It does, and we frantically start telling the driver that this guy is following us. The driver steps out of his car, and the would-be creep stops dead in his tracks. The driver stands protectively in front of us and says something along the lines of, Just walk away, buddy. You really don't want any trouble. The creep stares us down and then just gives us the creepiest smile I've ever seen. Then he shrugs his shoulders and walks back up the street. The driver insists on seeing us home, and he trails behind us the rest of the walk until he sees we're safely inside. Thinking back, we really should have called the cops, but we were too scared to think straight. Thank God for good Samaritans. I shudder to think at what could have happened if that car had not stopped, or if this guy actually caught up to us. I spent my first couple of years after high school just kind of wandering around and trying to figure out what to do next. I worked a lot of lame jobs and I regularly signed up for late night classes at a couple of different community college campuses. This meant that I spent a lot of time driving anywhere between half an hour to an hour to get to where I needed to go. And a lot of my commute took me to the parts of the city and the suburbs that I'd never seen before. Back then, everything felt way too big and complicated, and I was totally lost. But I absolutely loved coffee. I would always make time in my schedule to stop at It's a Grind or Starbucks, get a coffee, and read a little bit. I think it was because no matter where I was, one of these shops always felt familiar to me. This was sort of my way of coping with growing up. Once when I was waiting for a friend to get off work, I stopped at a Starbucks I knew. When I first walked in, I noticed a girl who seemed really familiar. This would happen pretty often, and at the time, I figured I recognized her from campus, work, or even high school. She sort of smiled when she saw me, but other than that, we didn't really interact with one another. This location had a lot of space. There was a large lobby with 5 or 6 tables, a bar-style counter facing the window, and an outside eating area, and even a few of those stuffed chairs. The girl I had first noticed sat at the table closest to the door, and I chose a smaller table by one of the windows, away from the other customers, but clearly visible by most. I don't really remember, but I probably just bought a mocha. When I sat down, I must have spread all of my stuff out because I remember the table being kind of cluttered. I really like to take notes even when I read, even just for fun. So I'll have a notebook, a pen, my book, and also my wallet and my phone on the table. I'm pretty single-minded, so when I read, I can get really into the zone. I lay my book on the table so that I can hunch over my notebook and take notes without losing my place on the page. Sometimes I'll lose track of my surroundings. This time when I eventually looked up, I then realized that someone was watching me. Another guy had taken the table across from mine. He looked about my age with yellowish hair. I remember he was wearing jeans, which seemed really weird because it was still basically summer and was really hot out. He didn't have any drink, and it didn't really seem like he was going to order one. Once he saw that I had his attention, he started talking to me. He had asked me small stuff like what my name was, where I was from, and what I was reading. I was immediately creeped out, but I had always been inherently introverted, and at the time I was trying to span out and meet new people, so I talked to him. Eventually, he moved over to my table and talked about how he was new to the area. He asked where I was going after this, and when I told him, he said he was going in the same direction. He said that since he was new, he didn't really know any of the street names, but that he could find his way by landmarks and stuff. As hard as I was trying to be social, for some reason, I didn't feel comfortable giving him a ride. I told him I was planning on staying at the coffee shop for a couple of more hours because I was waiting for a friend. This seemed to bother him because he abruptly changed the subject, but eventually brought it back up yet again. We probably went on this for maybe half an hour. He would ask for a ride or ask which car was mine, and I would make up some excuse, and then we would talk about something else for a couple of minutes. We eventually ran out of things to talk about, so he started to look at my stuff some more. He looked at my notes, asked to borrow my pen, and at one point he even picked up my wallet and started looking through it. Back then, I was really non-confrontational, so rather than demand my stuff back, I started to slowly pack up whatever he wasn't messing with. Eventually, he decided he needed to go to the restroom, so I started putting everything away very quickly. At this point, that girl that I had recognized from earlier came over and asked if I was okay. I told her I was, but in hindsight, I probably looked very uncomfortable. She told me that I shouldn't give him a ride and that I should just ask him to leave me alone. She actually even stayed with me until he came back out, and she even told him to leave me alone herself. He kind of acted shocked and offended, but then he left the store. At that point, I probably should have left myself, but I decided to stay. I talked to the girl a little bit and went back to reading. After a while, a lady in her late 30s came into the Starbucks. She wore a low-cut blue dress and a lot of makeup. Her hair was styled. She sat down across from me and asked me if my name was Dean. I told her yes, and then she asked me if I could give that weird guy a ride. She actually offered to pay me $20 to give him a ride. I politely refused and I got up to leave, but when I got to the door, I looked outside and I saw that the guy was waiting right by my car. See, the thing is, I hadn't actually identified it to him, and this was a large grocery store parking lot. I looked back at the lady, and she was just staring at me. Rather than go confront him, I decided to sit across from the girl that I knew in a spot where I could watch the car. I didn't want to admit how nervous I was, so I didn't call the cops or attempt to bring any attention to my situation. Instead, I pretended to just read while I watched the guy. Eventually, a security guard came up and asked him to move along. After that, I basically ran out to my car and drove straight home, making sure no one was following me. I don't really know what any of that was about or what he was trying to do, but I'm really thankful for that one familiar face. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. And remember, if you have your own personal scary story that you'd like to send to me with me to narrate on my channel, be sure to submit it directly to my website at southerncannibal.com. And before we bring this video to a close, I just want to shout out all of my $5 or more patrons, as well as my $3 or more patrons featured on screen. Shout out to Babe Lincoln, Beryl S., Kate E., Katrina T, Celeste S, Ellie S, Heather B, Howard R, Joseph F, Lori J, Matthew B, Michael G, Tammy S, Too Etchy For You, and Victor R. Thank all of you so much for supporting me on Patreon, and if any of you would like to join these awesome people and also become a patron, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/Southern Cannibal. Thank you everyone, and have a good one. And remember to always